Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of Her Stories run by WeWork India. Her Stories is something we started, last year, and it's been an extremely popular sort of segment that comes out of WeWork, where we get to highlight all of the women entrepreneurs, that are doing amazing things all over the world. And today we have a very special guest with us, Ankiti Bose, who kind of runs Zilingo, an e-commerce platform that has been able to sort of spearhead and break boundaries in our own industry. I'm super excited to have her with us. Ankiti is a powerhouse. She's been, on the Asia's 30 under 30 list, the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and was Singapore's 100 Women in Tech in 2020 as well. Apart from all of the other achievements that she's done, she's worked extremely hard in building Zilingo. And today we're just going to talk about her story and everything that inspires her and her journey up until now. So welcome, Ankiti, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me, Karan.
So just, for everyone who's out there, can you, just give us a quick intro of what Zilingo is and maybe what made you kind of come up with this idea or go down this journey?
Sure. So I always say that entrepreneurship almost always begins with a lot of foolish courage, right? Because if you overanalyze every situation, then you'll never really end up taking the plunge. So for us, honestly, when we started the company, it was obvious that, Asia manufactures a lot in fashion and textile. And obviously there's a lot of inefficiency in that industry and a lot of digitization that can be done. And the idea has evolved several times. I don't like when people say, oh, businesses these days have pivoted from A to B, B to C. The thing is, the world around us is being changed by technology so fast that we all have to keep learning and evolving, right? So I think that's happened to us a lot along our journey. What we saw was that, there were incredible e-commerce companies that were B2C, right? That had been built to bring the product from the brand or the seller to the end consumer. What had not happened, and what had not happened, especially in fashion, was how does that product get from the, farm to the fabric guy, to the factory, through the supply chain to the brand that's finally selling it on Amazon or Flipkart or Shopify or Shopee, or depending on, wherever you are in the world. So obviously a lot of digitization had to happen in the supply chain specific to fashion. And really that's where we found our purpose. And along the way, obviously, like all companies, we've had a lot of learnings, a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges, a lot of wins, a lot of losses, a lot of failures, a lot of mistakes. And here we are today, one of the largest B2B supply chain companies, digitizing fashion supply chain across 13 countries. We have customers all over the world, factories that we're digitizing with our software everywhere from Indonesia to India. And I think the real crux of this has really been the ability to say that no matter what anybody says, if you think that you need to evolve and you need to grow into something, then you have to have the courage to do it. So that's really.
I mean, it's obviously a very, a daunting challenge, or it's a really like large scale problem, obviously with, multiple layers in between it. But even, before we get into that, and I'd love to hear about how you tackled a lot of those things. Why, why was this sort of the mission for you? Why did you feel like you were the person who could solve this problem?
Honestly, I didn't have a background in fashion, right? I came from a consulting and investing background. I didn't have a background in fashion. My co-founder is an engineer. Neither one of us had a background in fashion. But what we saw was just a lot of inefficiency in specifically in the fashion and lifestyle supply chain. We felt like, we could digitize and modernize this industry. When we started, we were toying with a few things, selling B2C, helping merchants go online. And we spent a lot of time with these merchants. And we discovered that, their problems that nobody was solving were not around how do I sell this product online, right? There were just like 20 marketplaces that were doing that. There was Google and Facebook willing to market that to the end consumer. The challenges were really on how do I get the right product that I want to be able to sell on those platforms. So we saw that a lot and repeatedly. And I think from 2015, 16, 17, we saw that so much that we said, look, the only thing we should be doing is solving that problem. So I do think it came from a place of seeing like hundreds of merchants closely struggling with the same set of problems and then saying that, hey, tech can solve it. There was really no reason for us to believe that we had the fashion expertise to do so. I think we just came in from a very analytical and a technology standpoint. But you know, we always had a lot of conviction in it, because one thing that was different about fashion than other industries that we had seen was that, you know, like pharma or industrials or any other industry, once you digitize something, that product or that, like, let's say that SKU, it's going to be used for at least a year, 5 years, 10 years, right? Like ball bearings or chips or whatever. In clothing, in fashion, everything was changing every 3 weeks, right? So the traditional model didn't work anyway, where people used to plan for 3 months and 6 months and 12 months, or, you know, have like a spring, summer and autumn, winter. So we're like, okay, we don't know what's best, sure, but nobody knows what's best. The new is being defined altogether, you know, with fast fashion cycles and so on. Nobody's done ESG before. Nobody has a single clue where the product has actually come from, right? So you need technology for all of that. You don't know if a little child in a factory in Vietnam made that product, or was it actually ESG compliant? Nobody knows anything. There are no experts. Technology is changing this industry so fast. So we realized that whoever can learn fast and keep up with that is going to win. So I think that was the mindset.
Got it. And, you know, I think most entrepreneurs or people who finally, you know, take the plunge into this extremely rewarding, but, you know, sometimes sort of, you know, lonely journey, have to have something or the other that has, like, you know, clicked in their head, or you know, something along your childhood that had made you believe that, you know, I want to build a, you know, what they call a unicorn, or like a company of this sort of size. Where do you think in your life that kind of hit you, saying that, listen, one day I'm gonna, you know, this is something that I'm gonna do?
So I come from a family of like academics and engineers, and, you know, my mom was a teacher, my dad was an engineer. So I wouldn't say it was definitely not from the family pool.
Right.
But, you know, even when I was a kid, my mom used to tell me that even when I was very little, I would collect all her things in the afternoon. You know, I spent many years growing up in Dehradun, in North India. And, you know, when I'd be free in the afternoon, I'd collect all the things around the house and try to sell it to the neighbors.
Yeah.
And my mom would just come in completely horrified. So maybe there was like, it's like an anomaly to have that kind of a business mindset in a household full of engineers and entrepreneurs. But from a very early age, I think subconsciously I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But I think it only became much clearer later on in life. Spending time in Southeast Asia, spending time in sort of hubs where fashion was being made, I think it became very clear that there was an opportunity. And like I said, it was just a lot of young, foolish courage, right? That, oh, you know, we can do whatever, we can do anything. So I think that I hope that, you know, optimism remains in life, because you need that to do big things, big, crazy big goals. Yeah.
That's so funny that you said this, because just recently I had to do a talk for my school, and they asked me a similar question, or the school that I went to. And I also went back to the story of when I was, you know, a kid, and in the playground that they used to sort of take us to in the evening in our building. I used to make these parcels with the leaves and sand and sell it to the other kids as though it was like some form of chocolate or something like that, or like some form of pan. And when they were asking me about my, like, you know, why I got into this, or why I thought being an entrepreneur was, you know, was something I wanted to do, I keep thinking back to this story, that it was just like such a natural thing. And as I speak to more entrepreneurs and more people, you know, kind of on a similar journey, you kind of find this, uh, what might seem like a trivial memory, in your head, but it's actually sort of the formative memory or formative sort of like experience to finally bring you here, and it's super interesting to see that. Um, so with your type of business, it's obviously technology led, but it's similar to maybe what we're doing, but which has a very heavy dependency on the physical world and brick and mortar factories, supply chains, logistics, all of that stuff that has to come together for it to work. So according to your, as you are building the business, how do you, or what was probably the biggest challenge in that whole spectrum of things, and how do you think you overcame it? And just addition to that, I think that it's challenging, generally, but in countries like India or other parts of Southeast Asia, again, for a woman, in at least in, it's still not so prevalent. I would love to like understand how you kind of overcome that bit of it as well.
Sure. I think maybe I'll answer the first part first, right? Of course, like you said, and I in no way do I mean that building digital companies is easier and building companies with physical, infrastructure involved is harder. It's just, it's different, and the challenges are sort of, if you can't solve the real world physical problems, then obviously that has deep repercussions for the growth of the company. So I think the biggest challenge, hands down, has been COVID in that context, because obviously, fashion and textile industry, just like hospitality and real estate, were badly hit. In fact, the first quarter when COVID happened, we saw our revenues fall, and obviously we couldn't manufacture, the factories were shut, we couldn't ship, we were not an essential goods category in most countries, and so on and so forth. What it did was, I think it's just that mindset of just having a lot of optimism. We said, look, obviously, when as we go in and then eventually emerge out of this crisis, more people are going to need a digital supply chain than they do today, and that's exactly what happened. So I think as the digital companies soared in growth, most of us, right, those who were digitizing traditional old economy industries, faced challenges, but we ended up digitizing it a lot more on the other side of it. And two, three things happened, right? One is obviously all of our top lines and our revenues did come back, but very importantly, our unit economics, our focus on unit economics, our focus on quality of revenue or quality of earnings, all of that improved significantly. Our focus on sort of building for good and bad times, having a lean organization, but also one that sort of can react smartly to situations. All of that got tested and built, right? Otherwise, when you're a funded startup and you keep raising money for your growth, you don't experience some of those challenges, which sort of COVID sort of put a very, very, very strong reality check on us. And I think it has been an incredible learning experience. And on the other side of it, today we are 35-40% higher than our pre-pandemic scale, with like significantly better margins. And that would not have happened if the whole fashion and textile industry was not forced to digitize. Like I don't have to sell the proposition of digitization to anyone anymore, right? Like, because they understand they have to do it. So I think from a business standpoint, navigating an organizational restructure, people through such a crisis, and then sort of holding that all together was definitely the toughest thing from a business standpoint. Now, coming to your second question, I think this is obviously a very nuanced and an important topic, right? Which is that there are challenges, and like you said, whether it's India or Southeast Asia, frankly, anywhere in the world, there is still a challenge in terms of us accepting women leaders, or women leaders have their own challenges in terms of building companies or running companies which are at scale. And I think that gets even harder during a crisis, right? Because fundamentally, a lot of our biases, internal biases and external biases, it comes out and is tested, right? So I think I did personally feel like that was also being tested, that, whether I can build enough conviction as a woman in the team and the external world and all the stakeholders involved in our ability to handle a crisis in a solid way. And I think for most women, that is something that they face always or at some point in their careers. It's just that in those times, what I always would say to any other female founder, female leader in general, is that just sort of stick to being good at your job. And I think that really goes a long way. And raising your hand and asking for help, right? I think that really also goes a long way. So get the right people involved, get the experts involved, get the right help that you need, and just be incredibly good at your job, and ask for help and ask for what you think you deserve in those situations. It's easier said than done, right? but I think the world is definitely changing. If anything, vis-a-vis 4, 5, 6 years ago, even today we see more female founders, more female funded founders, more female CEOs. Things are changing. I'm not saying things are perfect or we don't have a lot of hard work to do on this front, but gender is becoming lesser and lesser of an issue at least from
I think it has a lot to do with people like you also opening the doors for a lot of other women, and I starting off young, even, which is probably another challenge that you had to face on top of obviously being a woman. You see those like some of those similar biases in terms of is this person capable enough, is he do they know what they're talking about, and especially in an industry where you're probably dealing also with people who are of a much older generation, and just like these guys have been running factories or supply chain or whatever it is for ages.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Breaking that is always a challenge. I believe that obviously in a time of crisis, the true what's it called, like the true attributes of an entrepreneur or an operator actually come out, right? It's really where it kind of defines who you are, and like how you handle the situation is going to sort of be looked at. So when COVID hit, if you could just describe to me, what was the feeling, or what was the plan of action in that close leadership team of yours, where you pulled everyone on a call or got everyone in a room and said, listen, this is the thing that we need to do? How did you bring that together?
Yeah, I think we did something very aggressive and not popular, right? So we said, look, we pulled everybody together, investors, leadership, and we presented a plan that would make sure that irrespective of what COVID did to our industry, our company would be sustainable. At that point of time, we didn't know that COVID will drive such massive digital adoption, right? Although, of course, now in hindsight, it's fairly obvious that tech companies would end up better for it, but you didn't know that, right? Like, nobody knew what was going to happen when COVID actually started. So we made decisions preparing for the worst. And then sort of midway, we had to obviously chalk up growth plans, because we were essentially saying that, even at the kind of pricing that we want to have, there's going to be incredible growth now, because digitization is going to become so important. So one of the things that we did at the beginning, which sort of actually we still love to do, is that we get all stakeholders on a very short monthly call together, right? Because we feel like, I mean, now COVID is for all business perspective, from a business perspective, almost over. But things were evolving so fast.
Right.
One country goes into a lockdown, but another country opens up. How do you reallocate the supply portfolio? Where do you actually focus on the SaaS implementation? How do you actually match demand from here to supply from there, and so on and so forth? So that was the time. I remember first India was in lockdown, then Bangladesh, then Vietnam. There were different waves at different times from a demand standpoint and supply standpoint. Demand came back quite quickly because US and Europe, started to come back quite quickly. So really it was about just sort of navigating that. So I think there was one big meeting at the start where we said, look, let's be brave, let's make brave decisions, and optimize every single cost, every single cent. Let's make sure that everything sort of works from here. And then we did check-ins every 4 weeks with everybody that was important, that was involved, because it was also important to take everybody's view in what needed to be done, although in a decisive fashion. Nobody has seen this kind of a pandemic situation in the last 100 years. So it's not like there are any experts here, but it sort of helps to have everybody's opinion and buy-in along the way. So that was sort of the experience. It was surreal.
I can imagine. And I think a lot of women watching this, or just anyone watching this is really gonna appreciate, or anyone who's operated a business really appreciates that time. I think those first 2 months of when COVID hit was like it was definitely like pulling everything out of you. How do you feel, now after building this big business and sort of being seen as a role model, for a lot of other entrepreneurs? How does that feel for you?
Look, I think personally, I feel like there's a very long way to go, right? We are disrupting a big industry. It's a $3 trillion industry. We're still very small vis-a-vis where we want to be and where we can be. So I think our goals are set. We know that, COVID may have been a challenge, but now it's sort of done. And now where do we need to go? I think we're thinking sort of like it's day one, and sort of preparing ourselves for a very long journey. But from the perspective of being a role model for other entrepreneurs, especially women entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs, I think I think it's a huge responsibility, and I think our responsibility as founders is to tell the truth, right, about how hard the experience is going to be, how tough the journey will be to make decisions, manage stakeholders, manage growth, manage profitability, really understand what the market feedback is, correct your missteps, correct your mistakes, fail but fail fast, and all of that. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind is be responsible in the advice that you give. I often see people say these really motivating and inspiring things, which are great, but somebody's also got to tell the truth to everybody else who's starting up in terms of just how hard it is. But at the same time, I would still say that the most important thing is to be optimistic, right? Optimistic about your mission, not be married to your way of doing it, right? Because sometimes really big companies have been built or today are flourishing on the basis of products that were not how they started, right? Or they have pivoted and evolved so much along the way. So I think it's important to be married to your idea of what you want to get done, your passion of being an entrepreneur and solving problems, rather than your answer, because your answer should constantly be evolving. Technology is changing the world so much that your answer should always be evolving. And it shouldn't be like, okay, my way is the right way. The right way is whatever works. So
yeah, agreed. And the ability to I guess indicate, like, see that and then sort of shift quicker are the ones that finally survive. And I think even through COVID, if most businesses I think got healthier, and some weren't willing to change the way that they did things, and they're probably not gonna see the sort of like growth that's gonna come outside of COVID or out of COVID now in the future. Um, you've obviously worked at multiple organizations. I mean, you've done some consulting, you said investing, in your own time. And how or what were the skills that you learned from that period of time that you were able to sort of put into building a business that you think maybe someone who's starting off just off scratch wouldn't have got?
I think, Karan, honestly, I think to each their own. I value the experience. Like my first job was at McKinsey. I think it was an incredible job to have. Gave me a very sort of strong work ethic and, power through sort of tough problems and ability to really sort of solve them. I do think that personally, I came in with the knowledge that tough problems solving tough problems is what's important, right? Rather than sort of doing something that is already solved. So just having a very problem solving mindset that sort of came from the job. Definitely working with smart people, building teams, that sort of thing that when you see at another job is easier. plenty of people are successful who start without any work ex or any prior experience. But in my case, it definitely helped hire people with networks, with capital, and so on and so forth. But I feel like there's no one way to succeed as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you'll agree, right? So many people have different journeys and different stories. This was mine. I do think, though, is that one thing that I feel is important for all founders, definitely I think female founders should do more of, is to build your own community or network of other founders and people that will help you. Oftentimes I see that a lot of people don't do that. A lot of women don't do that, like reach out for help, grab that coffee or beer with somebody that'll actually help you, and ask for that help. And previous work experience or not, I think that is still extremely important, because even when today I'm having very difficult problems, I may actually call somebody that I worked with earlier, or somebody that is another founder that I've had has solved a similar situation. So it's, I think, very important to have that network. Otherwise, being a founder is anyway a very lonely job, and it has we shouldn't shy away from the fact that it has mental health implications and so on and so forth. So you should know how to sort of manage that. Having that network to fall back on is definitely very, very helpful.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And so if you had to, give us someone who's your mentor, someone who's really helped you in this journey, or when things are really going tough, you really think about this person and call them, who is that?
I think I would first call would always be to my management team and co-founders. We're very close. So first call would always be them. But perhaps some of my early stage investors and angels, it's, I think, it helps to be super transparent and ask for help. Some of them are founders running other companies. So I heavily rely on others who also run companies. I shamelessly raise my hand and ask for help. I have called my ex-bosses at McKinsey. I will call whoever who can help me in a situation where I need help.
That's awesome. It's actually something that I try working on, because I'm not one of those people who likes asking for help too much. So yeah, it is definitely something that I think in the last 2 years I have done a lot more of than I would have liked. So tell me, like you're managing obviously employees all over the world, different levels of employees as well, from management to obviously people on ground. I know diversity and sort of inclusion is such a big thing for all of us building an organization now, because it's about time that we focus on it and sort of like build it into being the norm. How do you guys manage this? At Zilingo, what are the few things that maybe y'all are doing to help that?
Karan, maybe here's where the facts are at, and maybe it has something to do with having more women in the leadership, right? And I'm not just saying having a female founder, but without doing too much, we have a 50% female organization, and VP and above, like leadership, is 45% female as well, which is obviously, even in our regions, and we're not just in India and Indonesia and so on, but all around, that is still a much above average sort of number, just as a benchmark. But having said that, we've had our own sort of challenges and opportunities in this journey. And what I've learned is sort of, especially coming to the gender aspect of inclusion, what's happening now is that I think we all have enough top of the funnel at the early levels of the organization, where it's fairly gender balanced. So the challenge that we see is how do you coach women to really sort of keep up with their careers as there are other challenges in their personal life, right? So how do you coach them through that? And the answer that my view personally, and it may or may not be the right one, is that the way to coach women through that sort of interesting age of 25 to 40 is a little bit different from how you coach men. The kind of support that you have to provide is a little bit different, right? Whether it is because of childcare or, priorities being a little bit more balanced and so on and so forth. So the coaching has to be a little bit different, because oftentimes a man at that same age group, all they're thinking about is how they're going to make the next promotion, get that big bonus, get that big chunk of ESOP, and so on and so forth. And they can see that path very clearly. So the professional development path that is to be charted out, and how you want to be sort of inclusive of the women, has to be such that should they need time or should they need a slightly different path, we're able to facilitate it. And should they want to come back to the original path that they were in, we don't make it difficult, right? So we see it in organization after organization, situation after situation, that women just want to take a slightly different path, but when they come back, we're penalizing them for it. But society also penalizes them for not getting married and having babies as well, or doing it all, and so on and so forth. So I think as a leader, it's just important to sort of see the situation, and not necessarily, I don't necessarily see it as a woman, but just as a leader, I think they're extremely talented. It's just that the professional development path that has to be created for them has to be a little bit different. And here too, we've taken a lot of external help from coaches and so on and so forth, because obviously we don't have all the answers. But I do think that coaching women into leadership roles is a separate path from coaching men into them.
Yeah. And do you think there's, you have a pretty heavy, diversity ratio, or a pretty good ratio in terms of your top level management when it comes to having women leaders? I think that's where most companies struggle the most, right? Because there tends to be some form of a ceiling, even though people, don't like to admit it. It definitely exists. What do you think, if you had to sort of compare your leadership team in terms of qualities, attributes, just because of this good balance that you have, what do you think is the edge that you're getting potentially over someone else? Do you think there's a noticeable difference?
Definitely. See, I mean, especially in our industry, the end customer who the brand is selling to is majority female, if not majority, at least half female, right? Which is the end customer, who's the person that our brands are selling to. Brand is our customer, and then whoever the brand is selling the clothes to. But even across the supply chain in fashion, 65% of the workers in garment factories in Bangladesh, India, etc., tend to be women. So obviously having that perspective is a huge edge, because we obviously understand how labor needs to work, what policies will work, what policies won't work in terms of insurance, in terms of labor laws, etc., across the supply chain. I think from both the supply manufacturing side as well as the customer side, it's definitely an edge. I think if we didn't have all of the diversity that we have, we would be worse off than we are. Now, at the same time, I think we want to continue to have that edge, right? We have little pockets where we don't have that edge, and we want to see how that sort of plays out. But in general, what I've found is that the way to do this, or way to accomplish this, whether it is us trying to get better at it or other companies that are trying to get more women into the leadership, I see a lot of sort of these D&I type efforts which are run parallelly. I think that may not work as well as when CEOs or country managers or heads of the business themselves sort of take it as just an important metric that they need to sort of drive the business with, because leaving it with as a separate initiative and not making it part of the business is just that doesn't work. So I think what we try to do is always make it sort of key to the business itself, right? And the business leaders, literally the guys or the girls that own the P&L, should have that metric of making sure that the room sort of makes sense and is reflective of the factory workers and the end customers. So that's been the approach.
Yeah, I think that, when, I mean, it is just never successful if it's not been bought in from the top. So I definitely agree on that. And we've seen that happen also here, at WeWork. We also have a very similar ratio, maybe slightly less on the leadership level, which is something that we're working on. But it happened so naturally. It was always part of our culture. We were never when we started, in fact, I think my first team of 10 was probably like 7 women and only 3 of us guys. So it always kind of, happened like that. And I think that's when it happens and it starts off like that is sort of the best way. And that's what companies now, a lot of them just end up becoming. Um, I just want to focus a little bit on on you personally. If you had to sort of look at this, or look at you maybe whatever it is, 20-40 years from now, when everything is sort of past and you're somewhere, I don't know where you are, what is that end goal look like for you, or what is the final, I don't want a commitment plan, but like, what's the final end goal?
I think I feel like I definitely won't be retired in 20 years is too soon. Maybe
Yeah.
40. Actually, no, 40 is also.
I don't think you'd ever retire. I can see that.
40 is also soon. I think there'll always be interesting problems to solve. And in the next 20 years, maybe the frontier of changing that is not going to be supply chains and putting blockchain in supply chains. And it may not even be crypto. It'll be something in biosciences or something very interesting and very different. I hope that I'm doing that. I hope that at least if I'm not building something there, I'm at least on the sidelines of it, if not the front lines of it. So when you ask me that question, I'm really thinking like some futuristic, awesome, cool stuff is going on, and I get to be a part of it. But I think keeping with the
personally, just like I'm not talking only work and like obviously just going to be building businesses the whole time, right? At some point you want to be like that godfather sitting on top and watching like 5 other people build businesses for you.
I hope so. Yeah, but I mean, personally, I hope I'm doing all of this, but from like a beach.
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere instead of my office or my home office. I really hope we never have to do home offices again.
Yeah.
And we use WeWork a lot, so that's fine, but I just hope we are not confined into our homes in the next 20-40 years. And I hope that I hope that I've been able to personally leave some kind of legacy of really being able to create a positive impact, especially for women and for girls. I do feel very strongly about this because times are changing fast. So I really feel like we have an opportunity. I think in the last 20 years, we've moved ahead because of the stalwarts we are sort of resting on their shoulders in terms of what they've done. But in the next 20-40 years, personally, it would be great if, I could have a legacy, which is sort of bringing in a more diverse future, more equitable future. We care about that a lot. I care about that personally a lot. Definitely, and this is not all work, but it's like a personal goal. And the other one that sort of I think about a lot is just, around ESG. As you know, that's a big part of our business, and not just because of Zilingo, but 70% of the world's landfill is landfills have like fast fashion waste, right? So I hope I'm able to do address some of those big.
That's actually interesting. I mean, one thing that I'm also super passionate about is trying to obviously build something that can also impact the environment in whatever way it does, just being more conscious about it. So if you had to probably give us a highlight of Zilingo, and the product, and what kind of impact it's having on the environment, could you share anything about that?
Sure. I think, our view is that if today we went to all the businesses and said, make everything sustainable, but it costs them more money, or it doesn't help them grow their business or increase their profitability, then it's actually a very hard sell, because we're saying that, for the next generation or for climate change, do this and do that. And they're all coming out of a pandemic. They care about their P&L. They're like, array, but if this is more expensive, I don't want to do it. Which is fair, right? Which is fair. So what we do is essentially we have a factory MES software, which is a manufacturing execution system, which is literally digitizes the assembly line, improves the production efficiency, quality control, etc., and tracking across the supply chain. We're constantly evolving that product, but what it does is basically it helps you track exactly the product, where it came from, the assembly line it came from, how it was made, and so on and so forth. And of course, we've added now in the last 1 year ability to add fabric and raw materials and trace where that came from, and so on and so forth. So essentially where we see this being extremely useful is obviously in verifying the source of truth, in making sure that there's tracking traceability and reducing wastage, and essentially increasing the efficiency and utilization of all of these platforms. But what happens basically when you digitize it is that this guy, this factory, or this girl that owns the factory ends up making more money, right, as a result of that digitization. So we're not selling them that, oh, pay more money for something that is ESG friendly. Digitize the business, make it all traceable. You will make 15 to 20% more margins, and you will end up giving more traceability. By the way, you could reinvest some of that money into making sure that the fabrics are sustainable, etc., which we will supply to you, and thereby opening up new frontiers in terms of the product material as well. But at least the transparency angle is there, that from the S part of ESG especially, right, which is the sort of a little child in a factory didn't make it, you know exactly where it came from, and so on and so forth. So we are taking sort of a step-by-step approach. We think it's very impractical to make it a moral issue, right? You have to make it make business sense. So make it transparent, you save this much money. Make it sustainable, it's going to open up new sort of value pools for you as a business. And that's why you should do it too, not just because there's a long-term climate change. Of course, the intention is that. Of course, the intention is to make climate change solutions more practical in our supply chain, and it's needed, right? Fashion is one of the biggest culprits of climate change. So we're taking a very sort of step-by-step.
Basically, I mean, bringing a lot more efficiencies through tech, so the wastage through the process is obviously reduced, which will finally impact the environment in terms of the type of wastage coming out of this entire thing. So I think that's obviously massive, and at scale it's even even larger. We only have like a few minutes and I wanted to wrap up, but you touched on two things which I want to bring out. One had to do with the similar tracking thing that you were just talking about, but you also mentioned something about blockchain transforming the supply chain thing, and it's actually something that I've been we've been talking about a lot, especially from our procurement standpoint, and seeing how something like an NFT or actually just using blockchain to kind of track it could be beneficial. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is that something that you guys are even considering in your business?
Definitely considering. In fact, I think one of the big challenges in very diversified supply chain is source of truth, right? And I think that's really the problem to solve. So we already have, with our software, which is in the factories, we already have RFIDs and sensors that essentially we are trying to physically create a source of truth. Now, from a contractual standpoint, or from a responsibility standpoint, for most supply chains, definitely for fashion, I won't say all supply chains, I think blockchain will significantly increase the authoritativeness of that sort of data, right? That's helping us create that source of truth. In fashion, definitely we all struggle with that, right? This organic cotton supplier who claimed that this cotton was actually organic, then shipped that cotton to this contract manufacturer, this fast fashion brand. How do you know, right, that any of that is true? So we are definitely actively looking into how that could solve some of the problems. Right now, of course, we do authenticate as much as we can. And we have third-party authentication at every step as well. We do think that blockchain makes it actually a lot easier if it can be implemented at scale. So whatever is the fastest way to establish sources of truth that cannot be contaminated is going to help supply chains globally.
Right.
I think that's the key, at least fashion. Yeah.
1000%. And I think most people consider it, it's either Bitcoin or NFTs, and why people sort of so focused on this, but the underlying technology is so immense that can, that's definitely going to transform businesses in various different ways for sure. Well, great. Thank you so much for doing this, Ankiti. And, it was great having you. Great to hear your story. Super inspiring. And I just want to say congratulations again on, creating something that is so massive. And I don't really know that if there is much competition or if there are, other players kind of doing something similar, but I just wish you all the best, and hopefully we get to meet in person sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being part of Her Stories, with WeWork.
Thank you so much, Karan.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thanks.
great. Thank you.